Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, making my final predictions on what I think is going to happen here in the upcoming South Carolina primary that's going to be held over the weekend, giving my take on who I think is going to finish first, second, and third place respectively in the popular vote. And then when we get the results after the fact, I'm going to go back through and recap where I went right and where I went wrong. I've gone 2 for 3 in the last 2 contests. I had a really tough time figuring things out in Nevada, specifically in terms of who was going to get second and third place, respectively. The issue that I'm having with South Carolina, I feel pretty good about my first and second place choices, but that third place slot I think is up for debate among a few of the candidates. So I'm going to start on the outside of the top 3 and then work my way in, finishing with the third, second, and first place predictions to close out this video. So starting off, I think Amy Klobuchar doesn't make the cut. She hasn't proven that she can do well with a diverse electorate, and that's very important in South Carolina, where well over 50% of the primary voters tend to be African American in these South Carolina primary Democratic contests. And then also her relative weak finish in Nevada compared to the surprise that we saw from her in New Hampshire, I think has her on a more negative trajectory going in towards South Carolina. So I think she probably finishes somewhere in the 5th to 6th place range. I also feel like Elizabeth Warren isn't going to be able to make the cut in the top 3. Again, another individual that hasn't necessarily shown overwhelming support by any means among more diverse voters. And she's been a relative disappointment throughout this process, finishing 3rd, 4th, and 4th place respectively in the first 3 contests. It seems like she's probably going to be finishing somewhere in that 4th to 5th place range in South Carolina, which wouldn't be a great look for her as we head into the following days after that Super Tuesday, which is going to be key for all of these candidates to have success. Now, in that 3rd, 4th place range, this is where I had the toughest time deciding on who I was going to slot in, because we've seen Pete Buttigieg overperform the polls rather consistently, but also the fact that he struggles with African American voters, I think, hurts him enough in the state, even if he does have relative success among the white voters, where it might still be very difficult for him to get into that 3rd place spot. So I actually slot Pete just behind 3rd and 4th place, but I wouldn't be surprised to see these 2 individuals shift where they are, because with Tom Steyer putting him in 3rd place, obviously Steyer has put a ton of resources into trying to have success in the South Carolina primary, but he also did that in Nevada, where he didn't have necessarily as much success as what a number of the polls might have indicated that Steyer would have been able to do. And I think a lot of that just has to come down to the fact that Steyer almost has no chance at going on and winning the nomination. So if your voters view the fact that you have almost no shot at going on and winning the thing, then maybe they're less likely to be enthusiastic about going out and voting in supporting you, which I think has hurt Tom Steyer throughout this process. Also, the fact I don't think the support that you gain from simply buying advertisements and flooding the airwaves is the type of enthusiastic support, again, that will come out and vote for you on election day. So that's why I'm a little bit nervous about Tom Steyer, even though there have been a number of polls in South Carolina that kind of show him in that 2nd to 3rd place range. Would not be a big surprise to see him rather considerably underperform those particular statistics that we've seen. So then that gets us to the top 2, where it's between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. And actually, before we headed into Nevada, many thought that there was a possibility that Sanders could seriously challenge Biden, possibly in South Carolina. But the reason that changed after Nevada, you would think with the strong result that Bernie had, it would increase his odds at going on and winning South Carolina. But that actually wasn't the case, because when you look at the demographic breakdown of what happened in Nevada, Biden was able to win the African American vote, which is that key voting block in South Carolina. So if Biden was able to prove that in Nevada, especially after his relative weak performances coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire, that was looking like a really positive sign for Biden transitioning over to South Carolina, which might even be more of a positive among that particular African American electorate, even more so than what we saw from him with that block over in Nevada. And also something that's benefiting Joe Biden to go on and defeat Bernie Sanders is the fact that he got the key endorsement of Representative Clyburn, and then he had a fairly strong debate performance in terms of what we've generally seen from Biden throughout this process, where he hasn't necessarily done all that well on the debate stage. I actually thought that the South Carolina debate was one of his better performances. And then also something to keep in mind with Bernie Sanders, if we take a look back to 2016, South Carolina was one of his worst performing states. The only states that I think he did worse in terms of the share of the vote was Mississippi and Alabama, other southeastern states. And the polls actually were not looking great for Bernie Sanders in South Carolina in 2016. He was losing to Clinton by around 30 or so percentage points in the average of those South Carolina polls. And what actually happened on Election Day was he lost by nearly 50 percentage points. So even though the polls weren't looking great for Sanders again back in 2016, he still rather considerably underperformed what they were indicating. So we'll see if that's going to be the case or not for Sanders. I actually do think Bernie has a decent shot to at least make things respectable, given the inroads he's made with the African-American vote. And we've actually seen more recently a number of national polls where he's actually surpassed Joe Biden among African-American voters, but it's not exactly clear whether that's African-American votes in some of these other states in different regions of the country more so than perhaps the black vote that you get down there in the Southeast. But I feel like Bernie is going to finish in second place and get something in the way of pledged delegates. But in first place, I do expect it to be Joe Biden. And who knows, this might be the best result that we get from Biden throughout this process. Maybe there are some of these other southeastern states that he can go on and pick up as well. We'll see how Super Tuesday plays out. And if Biden is able to go on and win South Carolina and by something of a decent margin, that perhaps boosts his chances at being a bit more effective on Super Tuesday. But the negative side for Biden right now is Bloomberg hasn't been competitive or contesting these first four results, and Bloomberg's really cutting into that older centrist moderate Democratic vote. So when we head over into Super Tuesday, that's likely to cut potentially fairly significantly into that Joe Biden vote, which would make things much more difficult for Biden to try to get enough pledged delegates on Super Tuesday to seriously contend at the top with the frontrunner Bernie Sanders. So we'll see how all of that plays out. This is what I'm expecting to possibly take place here in South Carolina, with Joe Biden getting the most votes, followed by Bernie Sanders, and then in third place, possibly Tom Steyer. Wouldn't be surprised if it was Buttigieg, but this is what I feel comfortable committing to in this final prediction video. So that's going to wrap this one up. Again, once we get the results back in, going to go through and highlight where I went right and where I went wrong with these predictions, and cumulatively tracking the number of predictions that I get correct throughout this process. So if this is content that interests you, as well as all the other stuff that I do on this channel, going over the most relevant polling data and tracking the pledged delegates that these candidates are picking up, going over the results that we're getting from these respective contests, then please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and I hope to see you back here for my next video.